Those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Pakistan's government is facing rising national anger as the devastating floods along the Indus River show little sign of abating. Some 1,600 people have died. Upwards of 6 million are directly affected, according to the latest estimates from the United Nations, which has compared the scale of the crisis to the 2005 earthquake. As landslides and continuing rain complicated relief efforts, entire villages have been washed away and many towns submerged. Several areas of the country have been cut off, including the Swat Valley in the northwest and parts of Pakistan's breadbasket of Punjab and Sindh, some 600 miles downstream the Indus River. With 1.5 million acres of croplands ravaged, the prices of basic foods have skyrocketed. This is Mohammed Amin, a resident of Mingora in the Swat Valley.
People of Swat have been the worst affected by the floods. Hundreds of people have been swept away by the floods. Thousands of houses collapsed and hundreds of thousands have been affected. The inaction of the government in this crisis is regrettable.
Meanwhile, the Pakistani president, Asif Ali Zardari, returned home today after a prolonged European tour that sparked fury at home over his absence at a time of national disaster. The government insists his overseas trip was crucial, but images of the president at his chateau in France while his country's battling the worst floods in nearly a century have deepened his unpopularity and strengthened the role of the army. Zardari even faced protests in Britain, with a Pakistani demonstrator in Birmingham hurling a shoe towards him Saturday. Meanwhile, in London, Bhutto Zardari, the 21-year-old son of Asif Ali Zardari and the assassinated former Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto, launched an appeal for Pakistan's floods and defended his father's absence.
As we all know, Pakistan is facing the worst floods in living memory. The floodwaters have devastated the lives of a people who have already suffered the most at the hands of terrorists. I ask everyone to do what you can to help the people of Pakistan. This is not a time to play politics. We need to do whatever is necessary to help our brothers and sisters in Pakistan.
Well, for more on the situation in Pakistan, we're joined now from Karachi by writer and poet Fatima Bhutto. She's the niece of Benazir Bhutto and a vocal critic of the current Pakistani president, Asif Ali Zardari. Our latest article in foreignpolicy.com calls the current crisis Zardari's Katrina. Her memoir, Songs of Blood and Sword, will be published in the United States this fall. Fatima Bhutto, welcome to Democracy Now! First, describe the situation in your country, the extent of the floods and the response of the Pakistani people.
Well, it's as you said, Amy, we're now hearing that 14 million people are being affected by these floods. This season's rice crop in the Sindh province and the food belt of this country has been destroyed. The river Indus is bursting at its banks. We know that more than 2 million people are in desperate need of food aid. Many hundreds of thousands more have been displaced and lost their homes. And we are hearing now that Mohenjo-daro, which is the birthplace of the Indus civilization, the world's first planned city that has existed since 2400 BC, is under threat of being destroyed. The destruction in terms of the country's infrastructure has been enormous. Electricity grids have been shut in the Punjab and Sindh province. The Swat Valley, as you said, is completely closed off. And we are only in the middle of monsoon season. It is raining in Karachi today as we speak now.
And talk about where the president is. We should say that Benazir Bhutto, the assassinated prime minister, was your aunt, so he is your uncle. President Zardari, where is he?
Yes, by marriage, I should point out. But Zardari embarked on a European-wide tour. He stopped in Dubai, where he and his children have lived for many years. As you said, he visited his chateau in France and took photo opportunities with President Sarkozy and with David Cameron. That Zardari would leave the country at a time when it faces its worst national disaster ever is not surprising. This is also the month that has seen Pakistan's worst aviation disaster in our history. This is the month where human rights groups have estimated that some 300 people, some 300 politicians and political activists have been murdered in targeted killings in the city of Karachi alone. And Karachi was the scene of carnage just recently, where a member of parliament was killed. And anywhere between 35 to 75 people were killed in retributive acts of murder. President Zardari has a history of leaving the country when the going gets tough. Local pundit anecdotally once estimated that Richard Holbrooke has spent more time in Pakistan than the president. And he has defended his decision robustly to leave the country. He has claimed that that he has no responsibility at the moment to the people, that the Senate and the Parliament can take care of the disaster. But however, this is a man who is not only one of the most venal figures in the country, but this is a man who is facing corruption cases and the billions of dollars before he ascended to the office of the presidency.
How does he justify being outside of the country at this time of crisis, the worst flooding in a century?
Well, he said to the BBC that as an extraordinarily munificent Democrat, he has no responsibility because he has empowered the Senate and the Parliament to deal with the crisis. But of course, that's an incredibly hollow justification. The entire upper echelon of the Pakistani state has traveled to Europe and to Dubai at the expense of the Pakistani people. Zardari has been staying at five-star hotels everywhere he goes. He has been ferried around in private limousines. The security for him and his entourage is privately hired. So there is absolutely no justification. There's no justification for spending that money that Pakistan so desperately needs. And of course, it's ridiculous then to say that the president had to go abroad to lobby for funds for the flood victims, when in fact those flood victims could have benefited from the money that the Pakistani treasury has just spent on this enormously pointless visit.
You say, Fatima Bhutto, if rumors in the Pakistani press are correct, the President Zardari's European tour is more cynical than it seems. It's a trip to kick off his son's political career.
Well, this was what was being rumored not just in the Pakistani press, but also in the British press and the Daily Telegraph and the Times of London. And what we know is that this is a government that finds itself in power on the basis of a name. It finds itself in power on the basis of a name, in fact, that is not even theirs. This is a false dynasty. Though all dynasties are dangerous and false, certainly. But Asif Zardari remains in power on the blood of his wife. And we know certainly that, he's taken his children abroad to meet with heads of states before, that they are part of his entourage, that his family members, his sister namely, are part of, the 100-deep entourage that travels with the president. There is absolutely no justification, however, for a trip of this expense and of this amount of time, especially as Pakistan is submerged.
As experts grapple with the causes for the scale of the current devastation, some point to the poor construction of small dams or barrages along the surging Indus River. Democracy Now!'s Anjali Kamat spoke to Mushtaq Adi, a professor at Islamabad's Qaid-e-Azam University and a longtime water rights